Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture, the show where we discuss science, technology, and culture in its myriad of forms. My name is Ben Warner, and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks, Ben. I've got storage problems just like everyone else.
Yes, and I thought we'd regale my tale of something that brought this into sharp focus for me last night.
This is a good story and a warning to everyone.
Absolutely. So just as a general context, we're obviously living in a world that's transitioning further and further into the cloud and whatever digital services you want to imagine. So, you know, if you, as an example, you don't necessarily feel encouraged to go and buy DVD movies, for instance, when you can just get a Netflix subscription and you don't have a DVD cluttering the house and you can just get everything instantly through a subscription. Or you've got iCloud or OneDrive or Dropbox where you can save all of your files and you don't have to back them up to a DVD or a hard drive anymore. But the question then becomes, especially like people like us who, and I'm sure heaps of people as well, who would have a lot of legacy storage mediums. I've got, drawerfuls of tapes and DVDs and all that with all my files of, backups of videos and whatnot. The question then becomes, what point do you kind of have to let go of that stuff? Now, I kind of had a little bit of that forced on me when a bottle of bleach leaked in my wardrobe, and we only found out about it last night, and it ate through a few things. So that prompted me to have a good look around and see what else could I get rid of, what could I start digitizing and, sort of moving into. And the obvious advantage of if you're able to stay awake for all that time that you need to get everything digitized, that by the time you put it all into the cloud, it's all instantly accessible at a click. And actually, you're probably more likely to want to interact with that data or those videos or whatever if it's more accessible. So because, I think we were saying before you got on, we don't have the time these days, to chuck a tape into a machine, hook it up to the computer, batch capture it, say an hour of footage, manipulate it, and then you would get rid of it. And the only other way to, if you wanted to go back to it again, would be to redo that capturing. It's just a waste of time. You'd want it just instantly accessible in some sort of digital medium. So, just with that as a context, what do you think about all that sort of thing, Steve? It's just, it's hard. You don't know how long these mediums will last, and if you have the ability to go and actually read them at some later point.
Well, I think the good news is if you're 15 years old, what we're about to talk about is never going to be an issue. I mean, we don't really see people running around with video cameras anymore unless they work for a broadcast network. Everyone now uses their phones. God knows what happens to all the videos that are shot on phones today. There must be more video around today or created in the last year than probably in the 50 years, up until 2010. But we're the transition people. We're the people with mini DV tapes, which was at the cutting edge. We're the people that produced a whole lot of video because we could. We're the first generation that could. 8 cents a minute for a mini DV tape, great value. Only issue is you have to digitize it every time, and then there's the whole storage issue. And there's always been two ways to go. I mean, I've got 2 hard drives that contain all the scenes of a couple of movies that I made. I also lost all of my working footage on a drive that malfunctioned some years ago for a documentary I made. I've got all the raw tapes, but, and this begs the question, storage is changing, it's transitioning. If you shot it on your phone today, or if you probably shot it on a, some sort of solid state device, life's pretty simple. It's a file, but the tape transfer is the killer. And there's no room for tape anymore. I think it's time to either bin it or digitize it like you have and move it on, but not onto hard drives. It's got to go into the cloud, I think, is the only way.
Yeah. Maybe if we look at some of these in specific detail in a couple of instances, because there's a couple of different ways that this could occur. Now, if we look at mini DV and HDV, for instance, all tapes. Now, like you said, they were at their time cutting edge, top quality, and all that. But you'd be hard pressed to necessarily find. Well, you can still find them, obviously, but it's harder to find players for those tapes. And you wouldn't be actually recording.
Right.
You wouldn't be recording new footage on that medium these days. So the question becomes: it might, like, in a certain way, people like us are a bit in a unique situation in that we're producing a lot of content because of the films we were making, the videos we were making, etc. But then, there'll be plenty of people that have home videos as well that, on these things that they might want to, capture so that they don't lose it. So it then becomes, how do you do that? So it can be hard. You either take it in somewhere and pay someone to do it for you, or if you're fortunate enough, I unearthed my old mini DV tape deck, which, brace yourselves, cost I think a shade under $5,000 when I got it.
Oh yes.
State of the art, and it's got all it is a professional deck. It's got all the controls on it, the works, and I did really fully utilize it at the time, but I haven't used it in about, I don't know, probably a decade or more now. And what I would probably do is use that to just do a whole bunch of batch capturing of whatever tapes I haven't used, and then once I've done that, I don't know, maybe I can sell it on eBay or something just to see if I can get $5 for it or whatnot. I mean, you can also use a camera or whatever, and they're just some of the options with that. But what about, and this is something I wanted to ask generally, we may have covered it before, but this idea of how long would, if you kept it in tape form, how long, in those particular tape forms, how long they would last? And even if they did last for, say, 30 or 40 years, in 30 or 40 years' time, are you going to be able to play those back and get them into whatever the current medium is? That's the question.
Well, I think the answer to the question is, tape's dead, and even if you can play those tapes back, the real question is how long for? And this is the tricky thing. I think we mentioned it sometime this year that they made the last VCR player. And the reason is it costs a lot of money. They're precision instruments. So you can get a DVD player now for $30, which is great, but you're never going to get a tape player for that amount. So optical drives cost nothing. There's hardly any moving parts. Well, there are no moving parts apart from the eject mechanism, and that's it. Tape players, there's moving parts. So even in 30 or 40 years, if they're not mass producing these, which they won't because there won't be any demand, the price isn't going to come down. And $500 or $600 is a lot of money to pay if you can get one that cheaply to play your thing. So I'd be using any device that you currently have, and I would be at the very least digitizing them and shifting them to a hard drive. And even then, I mean, all you do then is shift the problem from tape to hard drive, but at least if it's already digitized and in a file format.
Well, at least you got some options then. You can either, have a couple of backups on hard drives so that it doesn't fail, or you use the cloud then. It's a bit more malleable in how you use it. I mean, just moving on, there's also, I think, this DVDs and CDs is probably the one that would probably affect most people because that's what everyone would use or was using for such a long time. I don't think floppy drives we can really count anymore. I had a couple of those that got melted in the bleach incident, but I was kind of looking at them just as, nostalgic value because, I could probably get a drive to read them, but they probably wouldn't even read because we had trouble reading them when we were in their heyday. But with DVDs, they're a rather robust format. And like you said, the actual ability to read them in the future might not be as difficult because the platform is cheap. I didn't have after I got rid of my previous MacBook, my IMAX Super Drive doesn't work, and that caught me short with the ability to read a DVD. And I just picked one up for $50, and it works.
That's
fantastic. Right. And so that in that sense, this medium is probably a bit more robust and longer lasting if you wanted to not go through the headaches of having to digitize everything.
Well, yeah, I think you're right, but it's a transitional issue, and once this is solved, and the only resolution to it realistically is the cloud. Unless they come up with some sort of DVD, and I don't know why they wouldn't actually come up with a DVD storage solution. Probably just because there's no one left to support it. But that would be, if you want to keep a hard copy, it's got to be in a file, and it's got to be an instantly accessible file. And I think that's the key to storage. I mean, just imagine if every time you wanted to get an old Word document or a spreadsheet that you'd been working on, you had to go to a cupboard, pull out a tape, load the tape, and then wait 30, 40 minutes for that tape to be digitized so you can, that's actually what it was like using the Commodore 64, by the way. But it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I think it introduces a level of convenience. I think if you have all of this stuff, files on DVDs or video on tape or whatever, getting it into that digitized format is very important, I think, for anyone who wants to keep it and have it at their fingertips. One other area that I wanted to just touch on as well, and it was on the dailylife.com.au website. There was a great little article, and it's got to do, this is more about your entertainment, so music, movies, TV shows, etc. So we had so many decades of it didn't really matter what medium it was, vinyl, tapes, VHS, DVD, whatever. You were buying a physical medium that you would then put into a player. That was the concept. And there was actually a culture around that, because you would then spend lots of time going into your favorite store or whatever and, developing your collection, so to speak. And although there's a bit of a retro aspect to that at the moment, vinyl's making a bit of a comeback and, all that sort of thing. There's still the fact that for the mainstream, they're probably going straight to Spotify or Apple Music for their music. They just pay a monthly fee and they can get access to anything that's ever been created, well, for the most part, kind of thing. Or you buy a Netflix subscription and you can get whatever movies have been created. And again, it's not quite there yet, but you can see that it's going to be very soon. Yeah. So why would you have all these DVDs sitting around? Why would you have all these CDs? And it's a generational thing. Like I said, anyone over, that's 15 or younger probably couldn't care less about having a CD collection. Whereas ours, we like having the thing on the shelf, and we can, when people come over and say, oh, you've got, this album and that album, that's a generational thing. And I just wanted to just quote a bit out of this article where she's saying, it makes me a little sad that the art of collection is dying, that instead of careful curation, we have lazy abundance. Friends sometimes confess that when they log into a streaming service, they're so overwhelmed that they can't even think of what to search for. And I know these services don't necessarily have all that much in the way of obscure indie music or some of the lovely rarities that we prize so highly, but with literally millions of songs on offer, even they wouldn't be stuck for choice. And I think that's an interesting thing. It's like, do you say goodbye to your collections then if basically you just press a button and you've got access to everything that was ever created?
Well, once again, this is a very interesting question. I had a lot of friends who were in bands and made great music, and I've digitized that and put it into iTunes as part of my collection. You'd never find that music on Spotify.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing.
But still, you still took the step of digitizing it and putting it in a format that was easier for you to utilize, I guess. Yeah.
You have to. I mean, Sony doesn't make the Walkman like they used. Although they still make one. But look, I think it's I think the article's right in what it says. But if you look at the wider context, I mean, everything's going that way. Newspapers, books, everything, the way we consume media. So it's just another thing. You're absolutely, I think the point made about the fact that you're overwhelmed by choice. I mean, you can go to any of these streaming services, whether it's YouTube or Pandora or Spotify, and you can, think, oh, great, I'm going to listen to some music now, and then you can't think of anything because there's nothing to give you a visual cue. But I'm sure they'll fix that. I mean, they know what you search for once and keep poking you with it, like in Spotify. Does it remove diversity of experience? Yep. But that's kind of where we're headed.
Yep. Maybe it's just a trade-off. It goes to a different type of consumption in that.
That's right.
You're literally not having to think about how you're going to get it. It's just there, wherever you go.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I mean, I just, there's the Genius selection of other music you might like. There's all that sort of stuff. So the experience will just be different. And, I expect probably in the future people will post more and more about this amazing music they heard from the 1960s, and people will listen to music from the 1960s. People start listening to classical music again because it's easier to get hold of.
Yeah.
You don't have to go searching for a 78 LP to listen to, there's files of it. And despite what people think with regard to popular music, I think, if classical music becomes easier to access, more people will listen to it.
Absolutely. All right, I just wanted to close off with one last little thing, just to give you a further context of this. I still I don't really like a lot of the games that are up for computers these days, that you play on computers or PlayStations or whatever. I just find them a bit too over the top. I like my 90s or 80s and 90s retro games where it's a bit similar, a bit simpler. And I do have, and again, I'm looking through what's in my drawer, and I have CDs of these games from the 90s. And in a couple of particular instances, and this is where, I'd encourage people to do this who are similar in this vein, is that if you still don't mind, popping them out, just for like a 20-minute spin or whatever, what you'll find is that actually quite a few of them are actually still available as a digital download. So as an example, I used to play StarCraft a fair bit, which I enjoyed when I was, in between homework studies or whatever. And I still had the CDs, the original CDs. I actually went to the manufacturer or whoever developed the game developer. They've got their website and they've got plenty of other new games. But I typed in that original StarCraft game, and as long as you type in the serial number on the back of the CD, they'll give you a free digital download version of it. So
wow.
So then you don't ever, and because it's a cloud account that you set up with them, you can just go there and download it straight away, so I don't have to plug in a DVD player to have to play it every time. So now I actually don't need the CDs anymore. So if anyone's in that position, make sure you do that, because it just adds a level of convenience that is hard to beat, and you get to relive your childhood and do all that stuff.
Well, that's a great story, and I think maybe we'll see more of these sorts of services. I don't know how, but, it'd be nice to think that, in terms of our storage, in terms of legacy, games and other devices we might have, that, we can access them other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point to finish up on. So don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there, obviously, because we're in an online world, as we've just been saying. You can interact with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+. I'd love to hear from you. We've got our photography on Instagram and Flickr. And, feel free to send everyone to scitechculture.com, get them to subscribe and do all of that, and you'll be able to get all the latest updates and videos and other content that we produce on a regular basis. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.